First up, President Obama's relationship with the news media has been dicey for years, but now a push to peek inside the nation's newsrooms could bring the president's relationship with the press to a new low.
What on earth would make the administration think it could get away with this?
Fox News is apoplectic over a new FCC study that would place observers inside the nation's newsrooms.
There's really no reason for the FCC to inject itself into the editorial judgments of all these people.
That's Ajit Pai, an FCC commissioner who was appointed by President Obama. In a recent Wall Street Journal op-ed, Pai warned that the FCC is poised to overstep its bounds.
They've identified 8 categories of news that they think news people should be covering,
including topics like economic opportunities and the environment. Technically, participation is voluntary, but Pai and others say broadcasters may feel otherwise.
The FCC regulates the media, and it has the power to remove your license, meaning to ruin you overnight.
The administration's defenders say critics are overreacting.
Nobody's trying to get, your pal Sean Hannity to stop disparaging the president. Nobody's trying. There's no conspiracy.
Now the FCC has backed off, saying it won't ask questions about perceived bias and how stories are selected. That's good news, but it's still not clear why the study is happening at all. So is the FCC treading on freedom of the press? Joining us to hash it out are Adam Riley of WGBH News, Neiman Journalism Fellow Susie Banakarim, Kelly Crossley of WGBH News, and Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University. Well, as I was joking in the newsroom today, if they only knew how decisions were made. It's just half of it is serendipity, or it's financial, or it's what bleeds, whatever bleeds.
Someone's out sick.
Exactly, somebody's out sick, and you got to have his cut. But I found this interesting, just in terms of a policy. In some ways, I kind of think there's a curiosity there, that they probably do have a genuine curiosity about it. But the idea of sort of going along and implementing it. Now, they do say that it's volunteer. And I think they're basically targeting newspapers. I know some broadcasts are going to experiment in South Carolina, I think, first. But there could be a genuine curiosity about it, because the two things that they pick on, the environment and the economy, are things that are just notoriously poorly covered, especially in the broadcast media.
Well, this sounds like a much bigger deal than it really is. And I'll tell you what's going on here. 2 years ago, the FCC did a study of the local information needs of communities. It's a very good study. I read it at the time and made some use of it. It was overseen by Steve Waldman, who is a very respected journalist. This new study is also a Steve Waldman study, and essentially it's a follow-up to that study from 2 years ago. Now, some of the questions that they have proposed to be asked did sound a little bit ideologically tinged, and it sounds like they're reworking the study a little bit to get away from that. But honestly, this has been done before. It's simply a way of getting some information. The fact is the FCC does have some regulatory power over broadcast media, and how these things enter the echo chamber is beyond me. Nobody talked about the previous study.
Right. I don't think it's that irrational that you would have people reacting strongly to some of the questions you mentioned. Have you ever perceived, bias at your station? Have you tried to cover something and not been allowed to do it? How are decisions made about what you do and don't cover? It's important to remember all this is happening against the backdrop of a really, really sort of brutal policy toward the media on the part of the Obama administration. Aggressive prosecution of whistleblowers, aggressive prosecution of journalists who work with whistleblowers. The World Press Freedom Index came out recently, and the U.S. was, I think, 46 on the list. We dropped 13 spaces or 13 spots in the span of a year. The authors of that index said that investigative journalism is imperiled here in the U.S. So the context matters a lot, and those questions that they wanted to ask, they have nothing to do with the FCC's legal mandate. I don't know why they took this tack, and I think it's predictable and understandable. People reacted the way they did.
But I mean, to some degree, though, I think we all can agree that it probably wasn't nefarious. I mean, I think it's a waste of time and money, frankly, to study this, because it's not in the purview of the FCC to help newsrooms decide what topics to cover, and I think we would all sort of rather the FCC stayed out of our newsrooms. But the truth is it became a hot-button issue, not as much for those issues or those reasons you described, but partially because, this is a good Republican message. This works for them. Government intrusion is sort of their hot-button topic, and this is a good feeder into that narrative that they're trying to build. So I think that's why we're hearing a lot about it now. I could do away with this study. I know it's interesting, but that's not what the FCC is supposed to do. It's not their job to give us interesting
reports. They're not
reports.
academics or media studies professors.
Right. Now, let me remind you that they said that part of this was to help small businesses enter it. So I would suggest that this is also happening against a historical backdrop of not enough small businesses, and also in that group, communities of color, folks who are heading up small organizations, media organizations that are headed by folks who are of color, being able to have a larger presence in the overall media platform. So why is that? If the government is asking the question, why is that? And that was part and parcel of that fairness doctrine as well that everybody hated back in the time. So some of the questions are really way off, but on the other way, because not just the government, but most people have no idea how these decisions get made. So, you're right, it probably should be an academic pursuit, and you're saying this guy is, who's heading it, so I don't know. I think it got a lot of attention because of what Susie said.
I also think there's probably on that point, Callie, some public curiosity. I don't know, when you all go out on speaking engagements, it's the number one question that people ask me. How do you decide what you cover? And
I get it the other way around. Why did you cover that stupid thing? It didn't make any sense.
What people don't realize is there's much less method to the madness than they think.
All right, I have a feeling the study is going to go away.